When I got here at the end of 2006, everything was broken. We had a lot of challenges, but we also had some cultural challenges. The strong culture the company had had for decades had largely fallen away during 5 CEOs in 5 years. One of the things I decided to do early on was take a service trip to Cati, Mexico, and build a house for a homeless family. Almost everybody thought it was a bad idea. It was really a challenging trip. But after that trip, we got back to San Diego and we were waiting for our flight home. And I asked people what their impression of the trip was. They said things like, best few days of my life. And I think that was a real turning point for a company.
Bold visionaries, faithful disruptors. Some call them crazy, but they are called to create. Under his power, for his glory. The Faith-Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. In this episode, Justin Foreman speaks with Correct Craft CEO, Bill Yeargin. As they celebrate 100 years of service, he shares with us the story of the company's legacy and how he inspires a culture of impact. Let's listen in now.
I was trying to remember the other day, when was it that we were with you when we were filming that story with Right Now Media? That had to have been at least close to 10 years ago. I was trying to remember when that was.
Yeah, probably about 10 years ago, I would guess. 10, maybe 12 years ago.
That's awesome. Now, when did you join the team? When was that?
At the end of 2006.
2006. Okay. So yeah, somewhere in the last dozen or so years. That was a fun story to capture. But the bigger thing is I don't think we get to say happy 100th birthday to many businesses that we talk to.
No, it's we're excited. 100 years. We've definitely been through some ups and downs, but we made it. Made it to the 100-year line, and now we're working on the next 100.
100 years. What a legacy. What a fun thing. I would think it was a fun thing to capture some of that. I know that a lot of the story that we filmed when we were with you a dozen years or so ago was really on that story. But walk people through that. What was the beginning origin story, the Malone family?
Well, the Malone family were from New Hampshire, and they decided in the 20s, 1925, to move to Florida and for a new start a business. A lot of people were moving to Florida during that time. It was sort of the hot, literally and figuratively, place to go. And so they came to Central Florida and they started a boat company and did well for a few years. But then during the 30s, you had the Great Recession and really struggled for a decade. World War II came, and still was sort of just struggling along during World War II. And near the end of World War II, one of the stories that really make up an important part of our history, one of those events happened as the Allies were making their final push into Berlin. They needed boats to cross the Rhine River. And Correct Craft was asked to build 420 boats in about 23 days. And at the time, they were building about 20 a month. So it was a huge, huge undertaking. And Justin, they closed the roads to the factory. They built a railroad track right to the factory to take the boats off as they were built. And the company undertook it, but they had a big problem with the Pentagon because the company's really important part to the company's values and culture is not to work Sunday.
Yeah.
They wanted to allow people to spend time with their families, rest, relax, worship if they chose on Sundays. And the Pentagon said they weren't going to allow them to take Sundays off. And the company said, no, we're going to take Sundays off. And so the Pentagon said, you better get the boats done that you committed to. And actually, we got to 400 some boats done a few days early. And actually ended up building 100 extra boats.
Wow!
In the same time frame because there was a couple other companies that were building them that were working Sundays that couldn't get it done. So we picked up the slack for those too. So that was one of the stories that really are foundational to the company's background. Then
isn't it amazing how those stories though are so foundational? I mean, when you think about it as a family, you think about the stories that you get passed down from generation to generation. There's something so special about it. There's something so important about those moments that are those kind of larger than life moments when the values are tested. And you think probably, thousands of times over 100 years that story, tens of thousands of times, those stories get told and just kind of what that instills into the very bedrock of an adventure. It's really fun to see the role that they play.
So the next big story, really as big, maybe even bigger, happened a little over a decade later in the late 50s. The company had another government contract. And so the government sent an auditor down from Washington, D.C., and the auditor wanted a bribe to approve the boats. Well, the company, it wasn't a lot of money, Justin, but the company wouldn't pay him a bribe. So the auditor failed the boats and put the company into bankruptcy. And it was a huge problem. Obviously, the family and the company was distraught, but went through bankruptcy. The creditors got about 10 cents on the dollar, and the company was able to reorganize and reopen. The debts were fully discharged, but Justin, the company spent its profits over the next 20 years, all of their profits, to pay all those people back. And at the end, one of their values, a big part of their culture was we pay our bills. And so I've never heard of a story like that, where somebody spent 20 years profits to pay back, debts they were legally discharged from.
Yeah.
So, that's another one of those stories that really are, just foundational.
Yeah. I mean, you just think about the power of that again, as you said, you didn't have to, part of the government, but to really kind of go above and beyond that extra 100 boats, that extra payments when you're talking about that, going above and beyond. What does that mean and how that instills that? I mean, you think that, again, you're seeing that compounding effect of preparing for you for the next test and the next battle. And you think about that over 100 years to just, again, the importance of well-told, well-passed-on stories of the values being tested. It's really powerful to see how those really play into the history of 100 years.
Yeah, it is. So the company spent most of the 60s and 70s paying that money back. The 80s, 90s, the company was doing well. But right after the turn of the century or the millennium, the family started having a number of issues, challenges and disagreements in the family. And the family member that was the CEO for 20 years, the rest of the family got together and fired him. And then it started a chain of CEOs coming in and out. When I got here at the end of 2006, Justin, I was the 5th CEO in 5 years. And so that was another really, really challenging time for the company. And then not long after I got here, we got into the Great Recession, and which created another big challenge. We lost 90% of our business overnight. So that was challenging too. But then, largely attributable to our culture, which has a strong faith foundation and strategic planning, we were able to take off after that and really grow. We were a $39 million company in 2009, and in 2023 we went over $1 billion.
More and more pastors are realizing the church can be a launching pad, equipping entrepreneurs to build redemptively and make a real difference. We've made it simple to serve the entrepreneurs in your church and your city. No cost, no catch. Get access to a ready-to-go video series, templates, and tools to host an 8-week foundation group right in your church. Just register with us, and we'll even direct local entrepreneurs to your community. We're building a network of 250 partnering churches across the country, each one featured as a go-to hub for faith-driven entrepreneurs in the area. Want to join the movement? All it takes is a 10-minute call with our team. Visit the link below to get started.
In 2023, we went over $1 billion.
Wow.
So, just extraordinary growth. And
so take me back to that. So in those early stages, because I mean, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I've seen some rough seasons of the Tigers, the Lions, name the sports team. I mean, we've been through some of those times where
I thought this was the Lions year, by the way.
Yes, well, I thought it was too. There's a lot of pain there. But gosh, we're now sounding like maybe next year phrases just kind of keep coming out. But what I want you to take us into is whether it's sports or whether it's business, 5 CEOs in 5 years. That's tough. That's a tough thing. What made you feel called into that moment? I mean, at some point, you got to think there's some level of almost like a cautionary tale that's kind of unfolding there right in front of you is It's not the business case exemplar. It's the, hey, this might be the end of a long run of a great family business transitioning into that next season. What made you feel called to jump into that moment?
So that's interesting. They tried to hire me to be the fourth CEO in 4 years, and I walked away. I lived in South Florida. I was very comfortable there. My family was there. I was connected to the community, my church, very connected in South Florida. And I just really didn't want to step into that. So I walked away. A year or so later, the fourth CEO left, and they reached out to me again. And I didn't have much more interest. I wanted to be, at that time, my goal was to start a consulting firm. And so I wanted to do that. That was my career. That's what I aspired to from a career perspective. I really did not aspire to be a CEO. But a couple of things happened that were just really dramatic, like right in the sky, things that I can't explain other than God things that convinced me and my family that we were supposed to move to Orlando. And when those, just a couple of things I've never even heard of happening before, happened. And
What were
so
some of
we
them?
thought, well,
Do you mind
sorry?
sharing some? What were some of those
No, of
things that
course
just
not.
really stood out to you? It's always fun to hear how God whispers and winks at people in these big crossroad moments.
Yeah. So the first one, there were two really big. Well, there were a lot of little ones, but two really big ones. The first one was our family. We just built our dream house. My kids were into horses, so we had built a beautiful house out in Wellington, Florida, in horse country, and it was really a very, very nice, really spectacular house. We thought we'd be in the rest of our life. So when they approached me the fifth time, we started thinking about it. We'd only lived in this house at that time, like maybe 3 or 4 months. And so I thought, well, I'll talk to a realtor. The realtor was a friend of mine, and she came by, and it was a real tough time. This was in 2006. It was a real tough time in that segment of the market. And the realtor said, Bill, you're not gonna be able to sell this house right now. It was a unique house, for somebody who's looking for horses. He had horses and all.
Yeah.
And so, we thought, well, this is a sign we're not supposed to go. Justin, about a week later or so, somebody was in the neighborhood looking at another house down the street, and they contacted me out of the blue and said, hey, I'm looking at a house down the street that's for sale, but I love your house. Any chance it's for sale? And I said, well, it's not for sale, but, it might be. And he said, well, can I come by and see it?
Yeah.
And so my wife and I talked about it, and we set a price in our mind that we thought was a little higher than it was probably worth. We thought we'd really like to get X amount of dollars for the house. And the guy came, he looked at the house, and he loved it. He made us an offer right to the penny, the amount that we wanted.
No way. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Out of the
awesome.
blue. I've never heard anything like that happen. So the second story is sort of as dramatic. At the time, my daughters were homeschooling, but we had a full-time tutor, and that was working with my wife to school the girls. And so she had come to me and wanted a commitment for the next school year. So I had told her that, we'd commit to her for the next school year. So this was like June when this was all was happening. And so after the house thing happened, I told my wife, I said, we've made a commitment to Pam. Her name was Pam. I said, we've made a commitment to Pam. I said, if we move to Orlando, we're going to have to honor that commitment to her, even if we don't use her. And it was big dollars. I mean, basically it was a full-time person for a year. It wasn't just, a few $100 or something.
Yeah.
So I said, we're going to have to honor that, commitment to her. Well, the next morning, Pam called me and asked if she could be released from her commitment to us for that. And so these were two things that were like, I just couldn't predict it. I couldn't see coming. And so I started thinking, wow, I think maybe we're supposed to go to Orlando. And then a few other things not as dramatic happened. Yeah. And I gave up my dream to start a consulting firm to come be a CEO at Crackcraft. So, but it's worked out well. I'm happy. I don't, maybe I'll consult after I retire. So,
well, it's fun to see how he whispers, he winks, and just kind of those moves of that. One of the things I want to come back to, and you glanced over that, you didn't glance over it, but you touched on this idea that, like, what does it look like to have some of your faith and your values tested by the U.S. government? What did when you guys look back at that 100 years later, or the 100-year history reflection, and you see that season as a company, what are some of the things that you guys took from that?
Well, just that most importantly, we have certain values. Those values are based or flow out of our mission of building boats to the glory of God. And that even when it's not convenient or even when it's costly, that, we need to honor those values. It's our North Star, is, those values and building boats to the glory of God. And, they're a great story. I can't imagine sitting across from some Army general and telling them, no, we're not going to work Sundays. It's like, wow, that took some courage and, commitment to values. So that's what we wanted. That's what we want to have today.
One of the things I reflect on, like being with you guys early into your tenure as we were filming the story for Right Now Media and kind of capturing that. And years later, I look back at that. One of the things that struck out to me was like you could see the culture that was being built. And one of the things that you took us into was just one of the Bible studies and the conversations. And I remember interviewing a couple people on your team. They talked about some of the trips and the experiences that you guys were able to go on together, and just sitting, on these trips and on these places, far from the office, far from the manufacturing side of things, getting a chance to reflect on some of those bigger pictures. It feels like in the story of Nautique, Correct Craft, and everything there, that there's a seminal moment on some of those adventures. How do those trips and those experiences play a part of kind of changing the culture there?
Well, they played a huge part. In fact, I believe that, we're alive today as a company because of that first trip. When I got here at the end of 2006, everything was broken, Justin. At least it felt that way to me. And we needed to make a lot of changes. We had a lot of challenges, but we also had some cultural challenges because that mission of building boats to the glory of God and the strong culture the company had for decades had largely fallen away during 5 CEOs in 5 years. So one of the things I decided to do early on was take a service trip to Tecate, Mexico, and build a house for a homeless family. Justin, almost everybody thought it was a bad idea because it's like, we've got all these problems to deal with. Why are you going to take, people off to Tecate, Mexico to build a house? But I was saying things to our team like, we're going to use our platform for good. We're going to fix this and we're going to do good things. And that trip we went on, it was really a challenging trip. It was July in Mexico. It's 110 degrees every day. We're sleeping on the desert floor, bathing with lake water, pouring it over our heads, soaping up, pouring lake water over our heads again. The smell was horrible in the community because the house we were building was close to the city sewage collection area. And it was just very challenging. But after that trip, we got back to San Diego and we're waiting for our flight home. And I asked people what their impression of the trip was. And Justin, people said things like, and this is not hyperbole, they said things like, best few days of my life. I've never done anything so impactful. Can't wait to do something like this again. It was very, very difficult. But, it just shows the impact it has when you do something like that and you try to serve others. And so when we came back, even though only about 25 of us went out of probably 500 employees at the time, all of a sudden people realized, hey, what he's saying is true. We are going to use our platform for good. We are going to do good things. This culture thing does matter. And I think that was a real turning point, for a company. And I have, since then, we've taken employees all over the world. We've been to Cambodia, India, Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, all over Central America, even the United States. And people often, one of the most common questions I get is, why do you pay to send people on these trips? Wouldn't it be a lot cheaper and more efficient just to send them money? And I generally reply, yeah, I guess it would. But we're not just trying to help the people that we're going to serve. We're trying to help our own team too. And Justin, we've seen so many lives change on our own team over the years because they go to serve, and it just has such a big impact on their life.
Hmm.
It has such a big impact on our culture here at CorrectCraft, the fact that we do that. We could write checks, and I could send a notice to all the employees, say, hey, we just wrote a $100,000 check to this
Yeah.
place in Haiti, and they're going to build a new building. But if we all hop on a plane and go to Haiti, and we all, work really hard for a week and build the house ourselves, it's probably more expensive, but it's changing lives. Our not just the lives of people in Haiti, but our lives. And then the next step of that is when those parents that go on that trip, when those employees go home and they sit around their dinner table and they're telling their family about their trip, there's some 10-year-old or 12-year-old that's hearing that story who's getting inspired.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't think we'll know till we get to heaven, Justin, how many people are positively impacted. Because there's some 10 or 12-year-old that's going to get inspired by that and say, I want to do that, and go start a ministry or an NGO and help people around the world. We'll never make that connection.
Yeah.
Even though
I love
they were
that.
inspired.
I love that perspective of just like, what does it look like to connect the why for your team, but also for the families? I mean, when you think about just kind of bringing that conversation, I love that perspective of just thinking beyond something that we're going to see, beyond something that you can put to a KPI or put to a glossy picture on a presentation, but really kind of thinking beyond that lifetime and planting those seeds, not knowing kind of where they're going to come together, because it's in your history. It's in your history as a company. It's in your family history. And to pay that forward with that perspective, it's something powerful to it. As you said, when you see it, you experience it, just what does that do for a team, for a culture, for a morale, for a tenure, from a commitment to recognizing that there's something big that you're fighting for. And I love that. I loved being on the manufacturing floor with you guys and seeing that just big old picture, building boats for the glory of God. And I can imagine the images and pictures like that become real when you have experiences like that to connect it to. And so it's fun to see that. Well, take us through a little bit of the growth. You mentioned some really big numbers when you started talking about the size of what you were to the size of what you are today. Walk us through a little bit of that journey. I know there's been a global expansion when I think of that, but there's a lot of different layers. Take us through some of the key components of that growth.
Wow, there's so many different parts. One of the first things that we started focusing on was global growth. We had 2 distributors that did all of our global sales. We ended our relationships with them, took it in-house, and we went from about 35 countries to 70 countries that we were selling in. And so we started focusing on having more of a global footprint. We wanted to grow organically through Nautique, and that was primarily done through great new product, development of great new product. We also wanted to grow through mergers and acquisitions. We've done a lot of not really any mergers, but we've done a lot of acquisitions over the years and acquired different companies and who have come into our CorrectCraft family and really adjusted well. People generally, even if they don't have a faith background, they generally love the values that flow out of that. The integrity. In fact, we try to take care of our employees. In fact, we try to invest in the community. So it's been an exciting ride.
Entrepreneurship can be a lonely journey. The weight of leadership, heavy. You've been called to create impact through your business. But here's the truth. Isolation kills vision. Comfort destroys calling. That's why Faith-Driven Entrepreneur created our foundation groups. Join 10 fellow entrepreneurs who truly understand your path just for 1 hour a week for 8 weeks. Online or in person. Together, you'll explore God's purpose for your business through practical, purposeful discussions with others who really get it. Don't journey alone. Your calling is too important. Visit faithdrivenentrepreneur.org and join a group today. That's faithdrivenentrepreneur.org.
How do those values translate? One of the things that, it's very tangible and specific, but obviously, well, first, one of the things that we love is when people have a commitment to excellence. And there's no doubt when you talk about Nautiques, you talk about the excellence that's there, the enduring test of time that they stand, and just what a wonderful product it is. But one of the things I also love is that you take an excellent product and you make sure that it's presented in a way that represents your values. And when you talk about boats and you talk about commercials, there's a part where you can question maybe family values and you start sliding into images or imagery or presenting this life that's not really consistent with values. Talk about kind of how you guys have been mindful of where that's shown up and how does that translate when you start thinking about going to dozens of different countries? How does that value a strength? Is that a help in some of the places where you go?
Yeah, we're very value, very culture driven. We've got strong values. We have what's called our culture pyramid, and you probably saw it when you were here before we had it then, but we've got it all over our plants, all across all of our factories across the U.S., and basically lists our values, that in that pyramid. They all flow out of building boats to the glory of God. That's at the top. Right under that's what's our why, which is called making life better. Then under that are the three, we call the three pillars, were people, performance, and philanthropy. And then under each of those pillars, there's certain key values. We sometimes it's hard for people because they look at a company like us, and we have to run our business with excellence. We have to be good stewards of the assets we've been given. So sometimes we'll make a decision that they will think is not consistent with our other values, our faith values. For instance, I hate doing it, but when you get a couple thousand employees, there's from time to time that you have to have a necessary ending.
Yeah.
With an employee. I've had spouses call me up and basically berate me on the phone saying, you can't be who you say you are. This company doesn't care about people. You fired my husband. I don't even try to defend that because one is I'm not going to get into, these are the 6 things your husband were warned about 20 times and, coming in late or act unsafe or, taking too long breaks or, so I just normally say, I'm sorry, that we've let you down or disappointed you. I hope we have an opportunity to re-earn, your your trust. So sometimes people think that because we have strong values that we can't also be high performers. And I tell people all the time, we can't live out our values. We can't invest in our people. We can't invest in philanthropy if we're not performing well. So I see it from 2 perspectives. One is I see it as we're stewards of assets, and we've got all these assets of the company. We're stewards of those, and we have to use those to convert those into profit, right? Just to be good stewards, which we're supposed to do. Jesus was pretty clear on that. And secondly, if we're not good stewards, we can't do the good stuff. So we have to have the performance to be able to do the things that we do and help people in our communities and service trips and so forth. So, but people get sideways with that, a fair bit, particularly if we make a decision as a steward that they don't like. We make a decision if we have to change a distributor, in some part of the world, or we have to change an employee, or change a vendor for some reason, they're like, they can get bothered by that. And I see it from their perspective. It's been a change. It's been negative for them. So they sort of default to, well, you don't really care about anybody. Look at what you just did. And that's hard. We try to be very aware of that. We try to be very loyal, treat people well. But if the business goes under, then we can't do any good. So we have to be good stewards.
Push into give me a random trivia fact here. So outside of North America, what is the most surprising place that I'm going to find a lot of Nautique boats? What is that country that people would be surprised to say, man, Nautique has a great presence in this country or that country? What would be off our radar?
Namibia.
Okay. That was not on my bingo card. Talk to me about it.
It's a country in Southern Africa.
Sure.
And they've got, I've been there, and our South Africa dealer over the years has sold a lot of Nautiques into that country.
Hmm.
and there's some camps along rivers there that those Nautiques are used. So I know I was surprised, even as CEO of Correct Craft, and at the time I was CEO of Nautique, that our South African dealer, I visited him and he said, we got to go to Namibia.
Hmm.
There's a lot of great customers there. And we went and I was like, there's a lot of Nautiques down here.
That's fun. Any other ones?
But
Any other ones
we've
that stand
sold
out?
into we sell into dozens of countries. We was up to 70 at one time. I don't know what the exact number is
Hmm.
right now, but we sell into dozens of countries around the world.
What it sounds like the expansion has been broad, and there's been a lot of different acquisitions, and it seems like it's maybe been people that you've already worked with in your supply chain. Has it been more of a vertical kind of acquisition, or what does that look like in terms of acquiring?
No, it started out more horizontal. We started acquiring boat companies. We acquired some water parks, and then over time, we started focus on more vertical integration.
Hmm.
We acquired the company that supplies our engines, and we've actually bought two engine companies. We acquired the company that does milling and tooling for us.
Hmm.
We acquired the company that does our wiring harnesses. We started a company that does our telematics. So it started off really acquiring other boat companies and a couple water parks, and over time transitioned into vertical integration.
As you guys have grown, as you guys have acquired, and you think about investing, how important has like-minded capital been a part of that conversation of growth and just making sure that you've got building growth entrepreneur aligned with capital behind it?
Well, we're owned by a gentleman who's, Christian, and, he allows us to use our profits to reinvest. He doesn't need to reinvest. He doesn't need to put more money in. We don't need capital. We're profitable and we can make acquisitions, out of our own, profits and capital.
Hmm.
As it relates to the sellers, really what we're looking for is the seller who's looking for someone to protect and nurture their brand, their legacy, and their employees.
Hmm.
And generally, the people that sell to us can get more money if they sell to a private equity firm that's going to try to strip it and flip it in 2 or 3 years, or it's not going to
Yeah.
be good for the brand, the legacy, and the employees. So we tell them when we buy, we don't have an exit strategy. We're not trying to flip them in 3 years. We're going to invest in the company. They're always welcome as a previous owner, and we're going to do all we can to, invest in the company and be good stewards of what they built.
So what is it like to celebrate a 100th birthday? When you think about that as a ministry, what does one do when you hit 100?
Well, we, I've been traveling around at all of our companies. We're having 100th birthday parties at, all of our companies. We're doing some few little things with our product, to acknowledge 100 years. We're planning an event in Washington, D.C. that will have a number of probably senators, representatives, and we're hoping representatives from the White House that'll be part of that. So, just a lot of things we're doing on our social media. We're sending out interviews. We did, basically we're calling it My Correct Craft Story. We did about 30 different employees that told about how Correct Crafts impacted their life. So we're sending those out on social media. So we've got, I don't have one on today, but we've actually got, a lot of swag that's got 100 year on it. So, so it's exciting. It's fun.
When you reflect and use as you're traveling and celebrating with the team, are there some key takeaways that you look back on and say, I mean, you've already mentioned some of them, but there's some others there that stand out to you from 100 years, or even maybe the season that you're in a competitive industry, 100 years in? What does it look like as you kind of move forward?
We're trying. We're trying to make the right investments for another 100 years. So I view everything through the lens of, I have a hard time seeing out much more than 20, 25 years.
Sure.
But I tell our team that I want to make sure that anybody who's at one of our companies today and wants to know they have a good job with good benefit for the next 25 years will have that. That's my job. So I don't want to make, short-term decisions. I don't want to chase things that may seem beneficial or fun in the short term, and pay a price for that in the long run. So trying to make good long-term decisions as we look out towards the next 100 years.
What is the innovation that you are most excited about of Nautique boats when you think about that? When you think about electric, when you think about just different boat wake side of things, what's the innovation side of things that you're most excited about?
Well, the wake technology has been really exciting. What Nautique's done with that, over the years. I mean, we came out with our latest version of the G23, which is the premier wakeboard boat, in our industry this past year. And the engineers, thank goodness we've got great engineers, because I can barely understand it. I know how to use it, but
Yeah.
in terms of how they manage the wake and just dial in the wake is really, for both surfing and wakeboarding and water skiing,
Yeah.
Has really been spectacular. We look at all kinds of things. We've got electric boat company, we've got a company focused just on innovation, robotics, so forth. So we're always focusing on, innovation. In the last few years, out of 36,000 companies in our industry, the last few years, twice we've been recognized as the most innovative company in the industry. So, that's exciting too.
It's fun. We like to close our podcast a lot of times just talking about just a piece of scripture that comes alive to you. Maybe there's some sort of passage that's just really speaking to you in this moment when you think about 100 years, or maybe it's just even to you personally. Is there a part of scripture that's coming alive to you in this moment that you'd want to share with everybody?
Something I've been thinking about a lot. In fact, 30 minutes before we got on this call, I was teaching a company Bible study on this, was Proverbs 3. Normally when people think of Proverbs 3, they think of verses 5 and 6.
Yeah.
But if you look at Proverbs 3, verse 5 through 10, there's a number of things that we're supposed to do, and there's a number of things, if we do those things, what God will do. And so I tend, so basically we're supposed to acknowledge him, trust him, seek his will, honor him with our resources, and then he'll bless us in different ways. And he'll direct our paths, and so I tend to not want to stay on my side. I tend to want to get over on the God side. And, you don't make it 100 years by being over on the God side. You got to do the things we're supposed to do. Trust God, honor him, and then let him bless us. So that the Proverbs 3, 5 through about 10 would be something that would jump out at me.
No, that's a good word. Church we're a part of here in Dallas has that phrase a lot of draw a circle around yourself and kind of stay in your circle. And I love that encouragement that you're giving us, is just to say, and that enduring test of time, God's going to take care of that. Let's focus what's in our circle and right there in front of us. Bill, it's so great for you to be with us. Thank you so much. We're thrilled with you just to celebrate just the legacy of just consistently standing for values and standing whatever the situation that seems to be thrown, and just kind of how you guys have learned from that. And also to say that even when things look tough and unexpected moments, whether it's trips to Mexico or things that might not pass the logic of anything else, sometimes might be that best thing to kind of change culture and shift into a new direction. So it's fun to celebrate with you guys. We're excited for it. Friends, if you're listening to this and this is your first time hearing about Correct Crafts and Nautique, there's a great story that was filmed a little bit ago with Right Now Media that we captured, that I would encourage you to check that out. It's a fun chance just to unpack a little bit more of their story, their values, and just kind of what that has looked like over the time of the last 100 years. So great to be with you guys. Look forward to seeing you guys again next week.
Come for content, stay for community. Join a faith-driven entrepreneur group online or in person. No cost, no catch. Visit faithdrivenentrepreneur.org. That's faithdrivenentrepreneur.org.